Welcome back. My name is Levi from Creekside Interactive, or Paper Plane on Discord, and I've been a little preoccupied with the game recently, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to do the edits on these. But now that I got them going, we're going to go ahead and just put a couple out this weekend, so there'll be plenty of content to take a look at. But without taking any more time, let's go ahead and get this started. From the last time when we were on, we already added in all of our landscape set up here, and we have the grass and everything, or the texture we need, and we started messing around with the brushes a little bit. And today we're just going to go ahead and go through the brushes. You will notice I have down here where it says no loaded regions, and if I try to select the mountain, it is grayed out. That just means that you don't have a selection in your world partition, so that is not loaded in, so that it's not editable. There are couple things we can do here. The first one is we're going to go ahead and make this one loaded in. So we're just going to grab our entire landscape. So this box here with the orange outline, this is the outline of our landscape itself. We'll make sure we drag a box across to encompass the entire thing. Then go ahead and right click on it and load region from selection. And you should see that your small mountain, or whichever one you have set up, is now highlightable, and you can do edits to it. And we'll go back to the details. So that's perfect. One thing you don't want to do is move around your brushes when you're not in the Errant landscape mode. And the only time you really want to edit it is whenever you are actually in the landscape mode, so that you can freely move it around. You can do it right here, but if you will notice, if I try to move it, you'll see that it's very glitchy and it takes a little bit of time, and you will get an error that says that you can't move this outside of the editor, which is referring to the landscape editor, the Errant landscape editor, excuse me. So you do want to kind of refrain from that. But if we do jump into the Errant landscape editor and then we move it around, you'll see we can move it around freely with no problems. So we're going to work on our detail panel here, and we have the small mountain here selected, and I do have this a little bit larger so that you can see it a little easier, since I'm using ultra wide. And let me go ahead and slide this up a little bit, and then we have all of our panels here as we normally would in our details. So we have our scale and everything, which you can use the scale and everything here as well. And we have our shapes. So you can set it to a spline if you would like, if you put a spline into the world, which we don't have one. We will get into that a little bit more later whenever we're working with splines and doing paths. And below that, we will have our height map. I'm going to go ahead and just close these just so we can look at the basic parameters that we have. We do have our height map parameters. That's the one that we're going to be dealing with mostly today. That's just going to control the height map that's placed here. We're not going to go into weight maps yet. We'll go ahead on that one on the next video, once we actually start adding in a bunch of these. So if we go ahead and open up our height map, we have quite a few parameters here that we can actually change and use to manipulate each one of the masks, and the way that the masks or brushes will interact with each other. So right now we can actually change out. So right now we have the, this is the small mountain, and we can see that we have the small mountain texture here. So this is our actual height map. We could actually go through and change it to whatever we want here, but generally I wouldn't. I would just keep it as the ones that you drop in from the create menu. So here we have our color channels, which you can use the color channels to give you different settings depending on what kind of height map you're using. Generally, height maps are just black and white or grayscale, so this doesn't really matter too much, but sometimes if you're using some things, you may want to flip channels, stuff like that. We also have our sampling here, and in our sampling, let's go through them real quick. So we have our sampling, we have our adjustments, and our version. So right now, you'll see that I'm on version 1. You should not get version 0 anymore with the new updates, but if you do have one that comes up as version 1, that's an older version, you want to go make sure that you put it on version 1, which is the newer. And if we go back into our sampling, we have our input type, we have our full range, add only, and height map. And we have our UV scale. You can actually UV this or scale it on the X and Y just like you would a regular texture. So we can actually put it 2 to 2, and you'll see that we have now a scale around, which is useful also with the auto wrap border. You can actually make some cool stuff there. You can also use your UV offset just like you would with a standard UV. So if you change your UV offset to say 0.5 by 0.5, whoops, that's the wrong one. Then you'll see that we're actually moving it so that the corner of the brush that we had is now 0.5, 0.5 right in the middle, and it's tiling it into 4. Go ahead and set that back, set that one back. And the LOD bias is the settings for how detailed this will be, the height map itself. The higher you go, the less you're going to get. Just like all of the LODs that you use in Unreal. So this is the level of detail bias. So the higher you go, the less detail you're going to have. This is good for things that are very far away and you don't need a lot of detail there. But on these instances, we're just going to leave it on 0. So 0 just means full LOD or the maximum. And we have the sampler mode. So what I was talking about with the sampler mode. So if we were to do something like put this to say 2 by 2. And you can see that the edge here is kind of cut off a little bit where you can see where it was starting to tile this one. We can actually change the border wraps to get different effects where they tile together. We can do a mirror style. Doesn't really work as good with this one. It works much better with the tiled ones. That goes to that one. So now we have our adjustments. Let me go ahead and put this back to 1 by 1, just so I don't forget. And now we have our adjustment systems. So you have your fall off. This will change, obviously, your fall off. You can see now if we were to drag it up and down, it is no longer falling off into the landscape itself. It is just right on the border. And we can turn that back on. You can see that it falls off to whatever the level is of your landscape itself. You can use custom fall off textures as well. You can, if you have square ones and you need it to be rounded, you can use a texture like a round mask so that you can make it like the one that we have here. So if we had say we had a brush and the entire edge all the way around was completely mountainy, you could actually add a fall off texture brush around it and bring it back to a circle or a square that falls off nicely. And we have the fall off start, XY, fall off end. We're not going to really deal with those too much. And then you have your fall off noise. I do believe we can get this one to add. There you go. All right, so this is just kind of, it's kind of like a purling noise or something. Just to give you a little extra there. It's just all things that you can just play with to get it to your liking. And I believe we can use the handles for the fall off. There we go. And we have the level input and output. This we are actually going to go through a little bit later, more in detail, because we are going to use this a bit. So these ones, as you see here, your level input and outputs, you can actually change these to affect the entire dynamic of the mountain itself and the way that it interacts inside the mask itself by raising, lowering it, stuff like that. Just for a bit more fine detail so you can really customize the shapes if you need. And of course, you can also invert it, which is really one of the things I like to do a lot whenever I'm doing, like, say, an ocean. which we are going to do. So some of this will be an ocean. And the easiest way to get a real nice ocean basin or deep water areas where you have some, shallow water areas where it looks really good with the water is just add in a mountain or something like that and invert it. And that'll give you a really, really cool underwater setup. And you can really exaggerate it by bringing it out quite a bit bigger and even dropping it down a little bit more. Oops, don't want to go too far because we're hitting that Z max or Z min there. And then add your water in and you see you have a really nice fall off. Something I definitely do a lot. And we have the multiplier and the contrast. These ones are really interesting. We're going to use these a lot, especially when we're doing weight maps and stuff like that to kind of get better transitions between them. But you can also do the same thing with the height maps itself. And your contrasts are just going to make it contrasty. It'll make it more sharp, or it'll feather it out more. So right now it's on 1. If we bring it out further, it kind of makes it more smooth like that. It's a little much. Whoops. Let's go down a little like that. So yeah, and here it will smooth it out quite a bit. And we can go down further and smooth it out even more, all the way until there's almost nothing. Let's go ahead and put that back to 1. And the multiplier does the same thing, but on the opposite end, it just multiplies the values together, and it can make it much more stronger. Or bring your multiplier down and it'll be a lot more subtle. So those two things really work in conjunction with one another. I use them quite a bit like that. So I can get some new things that weren't even really part of the height map itself just by changing a few sliders and getting some cool effect. Very, very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put all these back on. And that will get us pretty much set up. So let's go ahead and deal with the UV scaling really quick, because we do have a few interesting brushes, which we'll go through some now, that do different things. We have a couple of tiled brushes, which are really good for very large landscapes, and you want to just throw a bunch of stuff out very quickly to kind of get a base. That's what I like to do. A lot of people will probably just go mountain by mountain, valley by valley, and that's awesome too. Sometimes I just like to go and put down the base so I have just some bumps and stuff very quickly, and then I put in my mountains just to make it a little faster. That really depends on the personal preference. All right, so let's go ahead really quickly and just take a look at a couple of these brushes. I'm going to go ahead and drop these ones out. So these are the brushes that are going to come with Errant Landscape. So when you download, and you want to make sure you download this brush assets, which is a different download file, and we can go through and just take a look at a couple of them. Just click on it here and then click on your landscape here, and I'll pop it in. So we got our bulky mountain, we got the crater. The craters were really cool. This one is a lot of fun to play with. And there's a few extra brushes here, which we'll go through later as well. The Icelandic terrain. This one is a tiled, I believe. Yep, so this is a full tiled one. This one you can use to very quickly run through maps and do very large areas. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And let's just take a look at a couple more. This is one of my favorites of all of them. I don't know why, I just like that one. And this is very good for making some really big. So I like to just make them really big, bring them down more, and it gives it a really nice deep valley look. Definitely one of my favorites. So there is another thing we're going to go ahead and look at now that we'll move on to. Let's go ahead and get rid of this one. And we'll get rid of this one. Oops. So that is another thing. There are these icons for each one of these. If they do get into a spot where they become a problem, you can customize them completely. So if we grab this one, and let's move this to the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this one up really big, and you'll see that now my icon's way up there. You can actually change all of your icons. So if we go down a little bit, we will get to the visualization tab here. And in that one, you can change all of the items here and add extra items as well. So you can actually put in different textures that you would like for different things. You can scale it with the brush. So if you scale up, it's going to scale up. I don't want to do that because I made the brush really, really big. You can offset them in any way that you would like to. So we can actually bring it back down on our Z, like so, and get it back to where it was. Oops, right about there. Actually, maybe a little higher. We can change it to a different color also. So if we want this one to be a specific one that we want to look at a little bit later, and we don't forget about it, or we want to just mark this one for whatever reason, we can go ahead and do that as well. Oops. Wrong key. There you go. So now we have it in that red color. So now we know that this one is different than any of the other ones. So if I do add in another one, let's go ahead and just grab Rocky Hill and put it over there. Then this one will be the green color again. And that just separates them. So now let's take a look at a couple of the way the brushes work. So let's get rid of, whoops, didn't want to add that one. Let's go back to select. I'm going to get rid of all these brushes. And we will start fresh, go to create, and we'll add in 2 brushes. Let's do the Rocky Hill is fine. And we will do the Desert Mountain as well, which I think that one's really close to the same. So this is an issue. Every once in a while, you'll load into a brush and you'll get this errant landscape is waiting for rendering resources to be ready. And it just doesn't show up there. And it is a Unreal Engine bug, actually. The way to get rid of that one is to find which I have the small desert mountain. You can just click on it right here to bring it up. And you can find your height map, the H here. Go ahead and double click on that. And there's our height map. And we can change it from sharpen to, say, sharpen 0 or something like that. And then that should reset it. You can go ahead and jump back out, and now you'll see that it's there. That just happens occasionally. Now this is a good interaction here. So if we go to select on this one, and we move these together, you can see how they are combining together in the middle. And you see that, so this is 0, and then this is a positive value, and this is another positive value. And where these two meet together, they're adding together. So it's making it double, or whatever this value is plus this value is what you get on that height. We can change those settings as well. So if we go down a little bit, and this one is going to be in your adjustments under the height map. We have settings for the blend mode here. And we can change how they interact together. So right now we are on add and subtract. Add and subtract is just if there's any negative from the 0, it'll add it. It'll use that. If there's any positive, it'll use that as well. But it also does that on all the brushes that are connected together. But we can change these also. So like say only add means that it will only add to any of the other selections, but it won't do any negative at all. So there won't be anything below whatever's underneath it. We can only subtract. So this one won't even show anything because there is no negative on this particular brush. But if there were a brush that was slightly sloped and then high and then sloped, all you would get would be the sloped area and not the higher area. But really you kind of think of Photoshop and the way that the Photoshop layers works. And this pretty much works very similar. And we have our max and minimum. These ones, I don't even really use all that much. The add and subtract, only add, only subtract, and replace are probably the ones that you're going to be using 99% out of the time. So right now we have all of these brushes on add. So if I were to grab a brush, like this one, and go to select mode, grab this brush, and if I were to move this around into any of these other ones, you can see that it is adding this one and that one together, which makes this a larger spot, larger hump here, because it's using the value of that one and whatever this is and adding on top of it. And in a lot of instances, we may not want that. We may want this to actually be more incorporated into it without giving us that add. So what we can do is we can move this back just a little bit, and we'll grab this one. No, we will grab the one we want to replace, is this one, and we will go ahead and hit replace. And this one, we will hit replace. And now they will replace each other. So now if I try to bring this one in, you can see that it's no longer adding to it anymore. It's being replaced by this particular brush right here. And this one will still add into this one because it still has add on it. And the same on the other side will still add onto it as well. But I can also put that one on replace. And then whenever I put them together, you can see that this one is melting into this one more. And you cannot see the transition any longer. Now, the reason we can see the transition on this one is because this one has a positive and then a negative around it. We could actually, I guess we could potentially just do the add or only add. There you go. And then that one will only add to whatever's under it. But since those ones are still on replace, it's not adding to them. Just like so. And then we can move this around however we want and get a nice, cool effect. Very, very, very cool. And that will conclude what we're going to do on this video. On the next video, we're going to take all of this stuff that we just learned and we're going to start building out the landscape itself and getting a pretty cool look. And then we'll start moving on from there, finalizing the textures and everything like that, and start using the weight maps and blend modes. So without further ado, I'm going to call it on this one, and I will see you guys on the next one.